So in the last video, I talked a bit about the Hauflins, an original race made for my world. I generated the concept by starting with humans, but blending them with interesting traits from living primates and human ancestors. For the next race concept, I wanted to take it a bit closer to home, but still make it interesting. Those who are familiar with Tolkien will know about the Hobbits, small people known for living in hill houses and preferring the Shire over venturing. Other fantasy settings have used the same concept as Hauflins, for legal reasons, and found success, either by following the formula or putting their own spin on it. In this video, I plan to do the latter. Here comes the Hauflins. Hauflins are a species of diminutive humans whose adult height range from about 110 to 140 centimeters, aka 3'7" to 4'7". Their healthy weight range tends to be around 27 to 25 kilograms, basically 70 to 100 pounds. Typically, a Hauflin can live from 65 to 75 years naturally on a good diet and exercise, but the oldest one of their kind is said to have lived to the ripe old age of 145 years old through purely natural means. Any older strongly implies some type of magical means was involved, usually those who are some type of dedicated spellcaster. Now, as I have alluded to before, Hauflins look amazingly similar to humans in our world, except being shorter than their average heights. Though I suppose the real-world pygmy people groups on Earth would find their heights surprisingly common, although there are a few significant differences that are important to note. The biggest one is that Hauflins are frequently seen with a wide range of hair colors which are naturally impossible in real humans, including purple, blue, green, and countless other colors. The same applies to their eye colors as well. Most of these colors aren't caused by pigments, but by how light waves are scattered by the tiny structures in their eyes and individual hairs. Because of the layered structure of each hair or iris, light waves entering it bounce back at different times and thus collide or interfere with each other, and certain wavelengths get canceled out while others become reinforced, resulting in a rainbow of structural colors. One area in which Hauflins do not diverge significantly from real life is skin color, as none have skin colors that do not match a real human's skin tone. In fact, Hauflins can be found with a spectrum of skin tones from pale to tan to dark brown depending on their heritage. For example, there are in general 5 groups of Hauflins based on their phenotypical appearance. First are the Alban Hauflins, who generally have the lightest skin and hair colors. Hauflins with high Alban ancestry tend to have pale to fair skin tones, hair that is blonde, red, orange, green, blue, light brown, auburn, white, pink, eyes that are blue, green, gray, hazel, amber, or pink. Kuna Hauflins tend to have light to medium brown skin tones, hair that is black, brown, violet, blue, green, silver, red, or auburn, and eyes that are brown, gray, blue, purple, hazel, or amber. Meru Hauflins are known to have fair to light or medium brown complexions, with black, brown, blue, violet, green, or pink hair, brown, gray, amber, green, pink, or purple colored eyes. Denjin Hauflins tend to have the darkest skin tones, from medium to dark brown, and the darkest brown tone called black, sometimes with a bluish tint. They often have black, dark brown, violet, orange, red, blonde, silver hair, and brown, violet, green, blue, and purple eyes. Of course, like humans from our world, you can have individuals or even settlements whose appearances falls out of these established traits. Mixed individuals come to mind, but even those largely of one major background can have some unexpected traits as well, or look like some other phenotype. When it comes to Hauflins, it is important to note that they have biological adaptations to living at high altitudes, and the most traditional settlements have been found on mountains and highlands with heights above 2,500 meters or 8,200 feet to 6,500 meters or 21,300 feet. To cope with this, Hauflins have proportionately large lung volumes for their size. They also inhale more air with each breath and breathe more rapidly than species of similar sizes. Hauflins also have high amounts of oxygen in their bloodstream, a high level of hemoglobin in their blood cells, and have about 20% more blood than a lowland human. Due to having a lot of somewhat thicker blood, also requires most Hauflins to have hearts that are about 20% larger and stronger than expected. Their bodies are also rich in nitric oxide, which dilates blood vessels, allowing blood to flow more freely to the extremities and aids in the release of oxygen to tissues. Speaking of which, Hauflin hands and feet have more small arteries and veins supplying blood than similar-sized humanoids. This makes their extremities more resistant to freezing and suffering from frostbite that could happen up there. In short, they are naturally highly resistant to altitude sickness, resist the cold to a certain degree, and are hardier than expected for their stature. Hauflins that have moved and settled in lowland areas for generations are likely to have reduced versions of the high altitude adaptations. These groups of Hauflins may even suffer from light altitude sickness if they stay up there at first, but most eventually acclimate like their highland kin. Life for mountain people, as a rule, has always been a challenge. The weather can be brutal, and high altitudes don't always support lush forests or grasslands as lower elevations do. Luckily, indigenous Hauflin groups have acclimated to these hills and highlands, not only biologically, but culturally as well. The specific geographic and climatic conditions of most native Hauflin lands have encouraged reliance on pastoralism, as well as the development of different cuisines from surrounding regions, which fits the needs of the human body in these high altitudes. Most traditional ways of life for Hauflins consisted mainly of either pastoral animal husbandry or specific farming techniques. Rural families earned their living through subsistence agriculture, much as they have done for centuries, tilling the land with various livestock and working it by hand. Polyandry, or a woman being married to multiple men, appears surprisingly frequently in the history of many Hauflin families, and a lot still practice this coupling in the present. It is believed to be a strategy to deal with limited environmental resources by limiting population growth and enhancing child survival. For a family with scarce farmable land, if every brother married separately and had children, the family land would be split into unsustainable small plots. The marriage of all brothers in a family to the same wife allows family land to remain intact and undivided. Of course, other Hauflins are coupled together in different patterns. Those within the Ecumene, for example, they kept the land from being split by giving it to their first child and disinheriting the other siblings for much of the region's history, thereby keeping more monogamous marriages between one man and one woman. Speaking of history, Hauflins have had an interesting and influential impact on the world for both bad and good. So basically, they started out in their small homes or villages way up in the mountains of the world, or the valleys nearby. While generations of Hauflins mostly kept to themselves, eventually some would venture to the lowland areas and discover new peoples, and especially stumble upon remnants of a bygone era. These Hauflins would end up finding lost technology, magical formulas, records, literature that would start the Artifice Discovery Age. This would give Hauflins of the Ecumene region an advantage compared to the other humans and allow them to compete with the long-standing yet waning influences of the Jinnastani and Yaojing cultural spheres. These unusually ambitious group of Hauflins are also the ones who brought a level of rapid industrialization and growth beyond what the other world powers were able to accomplish, thanks to using artifices and uncovering the beings that would become the Anthropoids and having them work for them. While progress was good for Ecumene Hauflins, this prosperity came at a price, as much of the early artifices uncovered inefficiently used up world resources and spread much pollution. And the tactics used by these Hauflins to make business exploited the labor and resources of other races, including indigenous Hauflins of other regions as well. To make a long story that I really should tell someday short, this led to failed colonization efforts, independent movements, ecological and political revolutions for a time among various sapient races that were not on board. It also didn't help that oil and coal crises became more common, and thus artifices and created technology that used more renewables and sustainable resources and practices have become highly favorable into the present. There is an interesting divide between Hauflins that mainly stayed within their ancestral lands and those that have explored beyond them, especially those that have changed the lands they came across to their benefit. As a starter, Hauflins, especially those from the Ecumene region, became known for developing the concept of monsters, or at least popularizing them. While this mostly referred to creatures who invoked fear or wanted to harm, this also involved creatures that today would be seen as another race of people. So not exactly inclusive attitudes, mainly due to assumptions, misunderstandings, etc. Monsters have been avoided out of fear or defended against as a last resort for most Hauflins. However, as certain Hauflin groups began to expand, the idea of gaining skills to hunt monsters and that it is a duty to get rid of them or to make use of them became a common ideology even among other species like Amazons, for example. However, discoveries that certain monsters had a level of sapience comparable to non-monsters brought into question this concept that was taken for granted among people. Hauflins as individuals are often seen as pastoral, humble folk who are surprisingly hardy and peaceful. While they tend to be shy and careful around outsiders, if met with patience, they grow to be warm and friendly. Hauflins that have lived for generations with homins often have formed amiable traits or even romances despite varying lifestyles. However, there have also been Hauflins that have expanded their territory and cleared the trees that homins have lived in for various resources like lumber or farmland. This has led to many territory clashes with these particular Hauflin groups and homins, more often siding in the Hauflins' favor. Amazons are a different story. Aminosity is well known between most members of these species. From the Hauflin point of view, most Amazon groups have a history of pillaging Hauflin settlements for resources, taking the women as tribe members and men as mates, and usually homesteaders. As such, many Hauflin groups have had to find ways to evade raids or defend themselves from Amazon forces. This would lead to them to see Amazons as loose, hot-tempered brawlers unable to fully mature into adulthood due to their carefree lifestyles. Some would further contrast themselves by ensuring that Hauflin women would stay with the family, be productive of their male heirs, and be zealous in maintaining the household. Despite this, there have been Hauflin groups that have coexisted with some Amazons without being destroyed and assimilated, typically by having separate places that come together periodically throughout the year. Hauflins have mixed relations with the Fae as a whole, which really depends on the individual Hauflin and Fae species group. Most of the Fae are seen as far removed or out of touch in their affairs and only impact their societies on a small scale. And historically, the Fae have had issues with Hauflins who heavily industrialize and negatively impact their territory. Many Henge have interacted with Hauflins mainly by disguising themselves as the miniature humans, giving them a mostly mischievous or untrustworthy place in Hauflin history. The possible exception to this would be often become patrons of a household or deliver boons from deities. Some powerful ones like the Arcanes are seen as either benevolent divinities in the Yao Jing or malicious monsters in the Ecumene. Most spirits have been seen as aspects of nature that are either good if they help Hauflins or bad if they harm them. Much of Hauflin history has seen various spirits either as an object of worship, such as elementals, or to be warded against, such as demons or Yukiona. Jinn originally were seen as unknowably powerful and closer to forces of nature. However, once Hauflins became more ambitious, they began to see Jinn as competition for cultural and economic influence on the world stage. Anthropoids are beings that were actually discovered by Hauflins in a few artifice ruins from a bygone era. At first, Anthropoids appeared as typical machines, but they seemed to possess a rudimentary general intelligence beyond what computing could or still can manage. Anthropoids were hired by Hauflins to give them purpose. Anthropoids in turn adopted more aspects of Hauflin culture, mindset, mannerisms, and even appearance. While there have been conflicts around anthropoid autonomy and whether Hauflins should dictate how anthropoids should conduct themselves in the future, the two races still have a fondness and mutual respect for each other. So, in a nutshell, Hauflins are short mountain people that tended to stay in their comfort zone until a couple of them found ancient magic and technology and decided to show the world what they were made of. And after a long period of resistance and revolution, Hauflins are finally starting to work with their fellow sapient beings. Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks for watching another of my world building videos. Leaving a like and comment really helps this channel out, as does clicking the subscribe button there. I also have a lot more to discuss about my setting, and if it helps inspire anybody with their own, then that's great. So I have to prep the next video, but I hope you all have a good time.